Let's begin. But first, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Sky High Stories. To everyone who knew them, their marriage looked like a dream carefully curated for admiration. They were the couple people pointed to and said, "That's what success looks like." The husband was rising fast in his career, confident, well-dressed, always composed. The wife stood beside him gracefully, smiling at events, supporting him in meetings, hosting dinners that impressed the right people. Together, they looked unshakable, as if nothing could ever go wrong. He was ambitious to the core. Every decision he made was measured against how it would affect his future, his reputation, his carefully constructed image. Emotions were inconvenient, vulnerability unnecessary. He believed control was strength, and strength was everything. Love, to him, was stable only when it didn't interfere with progress. She was his opposite in the quietest way. Loving, patient, deeply present. She adjusted her life around his goals without complaint, placing her own dreams gently on hold. When he worked late, she waited. When he traveled, she rearranged her schedule. She believed marriage meant partnership, even if that partnership slowly became one-sided. Her sacrifices were invisible, but constant. Beneath the polished surface, small cracks had already formed. Conversations revolved around his work, his stress, his plans. Decisions were made by him, for both of them. He spoke often about legacy, his name, his achievements, what he would leave behind, but never about children, never about shared responsibility. Whenever the topic of deeper commitment surfaced, he redirected it back to timing, control, and readiness. What no one saw was the quiet imbalance growing between them. A marriage held together by appearances, not emotional safety. A love that thrived only as long as it demanded nothing uncomfortable. And beneath it all, an unspoken fear, because the moment responsibility arrived, everything carefully built might begin to unravel. The day she found out she was pregnant began like any other, ordinary and unremarkable. It wasn't until she stood alone in the bathroom, staring at the small test in her trembling hands, that the world seemed to tilt. 2 lines. Clear. Unmistakable. Her first reaction wasn't joy, but shock, followed quickly by fear. Then, slowly, hope crept in. This was unexpected, yes, but it was also life. Their life. A future she believed they would step into together. For days, she carried the secret quietly, her emotions swinging between excitement and anxiety. She imagined his reaction over and over, rehearsing the moment in her mind. Maybe he would be surprised. Maybe he would need time. But surely, she believed, he would come around. She planned a simple, heartfelt reveal, nothing dramatic, just the truth wrapped in love. She wanted him to hear it from her, gently, in a space where they could breathe. When she finally told him, the silence that followed was heavy and unnatural. His face didn't soften. His eyes didn't light up. Instead, his expression hardened, as if she had delivered bad news instead of a miracle. He asked no questions about her feelings. No concern about her health. Only one sharp question after another. Now. Are you sure? Do you know what this will do to everything? Shock quickly turned to accusation. He questioned the timing, as if life had waited for his permission. Then, without any reason, he questioned paternity, planting doubt where trust should have been. His voice grew colder as he spoke about reputation, about how people would talk, about how this could disrupt everything he had worked for. In that moment, she realized something devastating. His love had limits. It existed only when life followed his plan. The pregnancy wasn't just unexpected, it was inconvenient. And with that realization, the marriage she believed in shattered quietly, overnight. The days following the revelation felt heavy, as if the air inside their home had changed. Conversations became short, clipped, and tense. Then, one night, he finally said what he had been circling around with cold avoidance. He told her plainly that he wasn't ready to be a father. Not now. Maybe not ever. His words were calm, almost rehearsed, as if this were a business decision rather than the fate of a life growing inside her. He gave her 2 options, delivered without emotion. She could fix it quietly, make the pregnancy disappear before anyone found out. Or she could keep silent, agree to carry the child without ever attaching his name to it. No public acknowledgement. No expectations. No disruption to his carefully managed future. To him, this wasn't cruelty, it was efficiency. She listened, stunned, her hands resting protectively over her stomach. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite the storm inside her. She told him she couldn't do that. She wouldn't erase her child to preserve his comfort. She had already made her choice, and it wasn't based on fear or convenience. It was based on love. That was when the argument exploded. He accused her of planning this, of trying to trap him into a life he hadn't agreed to. He claimed she was using the pregnancy to control him, to force responsibility onto his shoulders. Every word cut deeper than the last, because it stripped their marriage of trust. In his mind, the pregnancy wasn't a blessing, it was a threat. A liability. A stain on the image he had spent years polishing. She tried to remind him of their vows, of the life they had promised to build together. But he wasn't listening. Ego drowned out love. Fear of loss outweighed any sense of duty. Slowly, deliberately, he began to shut down. He stopped speaking to her unless necessary. He avoided coming home. When he did, his presence was distant, empty. By the time she realized it, she was already alone. Not just in her pregnancy, but in her marriage. And the line between them had been drawn, clear, unforgiving, and permanent. The divorce papers arrived quietly, slipped into her hands with the same emotional weight as a receipt. No discussion. No final attempt at understanding. Just documents prepared by lawyers who spoke in cold, precise language, reducing her marriage, and her pregnancy, to clauses, timelines, and obligations. She read words like irreconcilable differences and financial settlement, wondering how love had been erased so efficiently. He didn't come with her to meetings. He sent representatives instead. Men and women who didn't look at her face for too long, who avoided her eyes as if her pain were contagious. There was no empathy in the room, only procedure. They talked about assets, confidentiality, and discretion, never about the child she carried or the years she had given. Through his lawyer, he made an offer. Money. Enough to survive, enough to disappear quietly. In return, he wanted silence. No claims. No public acknowledgement. No mention of his name attached to the pregnancy. It was framed as generosity, but it felt like a transaction meant to erase her existence from his life completely. She signed what she had to, refusing what she could. She didn't argue for more. She didn't beg. She chose to walk away with minimal support but her dignity intact. When she packed her belongings, the house felt unfamiliar, like a place she had only borrowed. Every room held echoes of promises that no longer mattered. Outside those walls, judgment waited. Whispers followed her, friends who stopped calling, acquaintances who speculated quietly. Some assumed she had failed as a wife. Others believed the rumors he never corrected. Isolation settled in slowly, heavier than fear. She learned how quickly admiration turns into distance when a woman stands alone. On the day she left for good, he finally appeared. Not to apologize. Not to explain. Just to ensure the separation was complete. She looked at him once, seeing a stranger where her husband used to be. Before closing the door, she said the only words left to protect herself. "Don't ever contact me again." And with that, she walked away, pregnant, abandoned, and completely alone. The night her son was born was long, exhausting, and painfully quiet. Hospital lights glowed harshly above her as contractions came in relentless waves. There was no hand to hold, no familiar voice whispering reassurance. Just nurses doing their jobs and the steady rhythm of her own breathing as she fought through the pain alone. Every cry she stifled carried more than physical agony, it carried the weight of abandonment. When the moment finally came, when she heard his first cry cut through the silence, something inside her shifted. Exhaustion blurred into relief, and fear gave way to fierce love. She held him against her chest, tears slipping freely now, not from pain but from the overwhelming reality that she had survived. They had survived. In that small hospital room, it was just the two of them against the world. When the nurse asked for the father's name, she paused. The question lingered in the air, heavy and unnecessary. She shook her head gently and gave only her own surname. No explanations. No bitterness. Just a decision made with clarity. Her son would not carry the name of someone who had rejected him before he even took his first breath. As she looked down at his tiny face, she made a quiet vow. He would never feel unwanted. He would never question his worth because of someone else's fear. She would protect him from the kind of rejection that breaks people before they learn who they are. Whatever it took, she would be enough. Recovery was slow, but her resolve was strong. Each sleepless night, each whispered lullaby, each exhausted smile strengthened the bond between them. In caring for him, she found her own resilience taking root. This was no longer a story about loss, it was the beginning of something new. A life built not on absence, but on unwavering love. 7 years passed without a single word from him. No calls. No letters. No curiosity about the life he had walked away from. In that silence, she rebuilt everything from the ground up. The early years were the hardest, balancing work and motherhood, surviving on little sleep and even less certainty. She took jobs she never imagined she would, worked late nights, and learned how to stretch every dollar. There were moments of doubt, moments when exhaustion threatened to break her, but she never allowed herself to stop. Slowly, stability replaced survival. Through sheer determination, she carved out a life that felt safe. A modest home. A routine built around school mornings and bedtime stories. She earned respect not through connections, but through consistency and grit. Each small victory mattered because she had fought for it alone. Her son grew into a boy who surprised everyone. He was kind in a way that felt intentional, thoughtful beyond his years. Teachers spoke of his curiosity, his empathy, the quiet confidence with which he carried himself. He asked questions about the world, about fairness, about why people made the choices they did. And sometimes, when she watched him laugh or concentrate deeply, she noticed it, the familiar tilt of his head, the sharp focus in his eyes. He resembled someone she had chosen never to mention. He never asked about his father, not directly. And she never filled the silence with bitterness. When questions about family came up, she spoke carefully, truthfully, without resentment. She taught him that worth was not defined by who stayed or who left, but by how you treated others and yourself. Love, she explained, was shown through presence, not promises. In raising him, she healed parts of herself she didn't know were broken. She learned strength that didn't require anger and independence that didn't harden her heart. Their life wasn't extravagant, but it was full. Full of trust. Full of warmth. And built entirely without the man who had once believed walking away was the easiest choice. The reunion happened in the most ordinary way, without warning or preparation. It was a public event, a school fundraiser held in a well-appointed hall, filled with polite conversations and familiar faces. She attended for her son, standing near the back, listening half-heartedly while keeping an eye on him. It was just another obligation in a long list of responsibilities. Or so she thought. He arrived late, as always. The room subtly shifted when he walked in, tailored suit, confident posture, the ease of someone accustomed to being admired. Time had been kind to him. His career had flourished, his name now carried weight, and people greeted him with respect. He looked exactly like the man she had once believed in, only more polished, more self-assured. She noticed him at the same moment he noticed the boy. His gaze locked, not out of recognition, but instinct. The child stood a few feet away, laughing as he spoke, his hands moving in familiar gestures. There was something unsettling in the way the boy carried himself, something that tugged at memory. The eyes, sharp and observant. The slight tilt of the head when he listened. Even the tone of his voice, clear and confident, sent a chill through him. He couldn't look away. At first, he told himself it was coincidence. Children resemble people all the time. But the feeling didn't pass. Instead, it grew stronger, heavier, pulling his attention back again and again. Confusion crept in, followed by unease. He searched the room until his eyes landed on her. 7 years hadn't erased her. She stood calmer now, grounded, nothing like the woman he had left behind. Their eyes met briefly, and in that instant, something unspoken passed between them. Her expression didn't change. No shock. No fear. Just quiet awareness. His heart began to pound, not with guilt, but with realization. He felt it then, sharp and undeniable. This encounter wasn't accidental. Something from his past had found him. And the boy, standing so confidently in that room, held a truth he wasn't ready to face. He waited longer than he meant to, watching from a distance as the boy moved through the room with effortless confidence. Every laugh, every gesture tightened the knot in his chest. Finally, when the crowd thinned and there was no one close enough to overhear, he approached her. The years between them collapsed into a single, fragile moment. His voice wasn't as steady as he intended. "Who's the boy?" The question hung in the air, heavy enough to still time itself. She turned to face him fully, her expression composed, unreadable. There was no flicker of surprise, no visible emotion at all. Only calm. A calm that unsettled him far more than anger ever could. "That's not something I owe you," she replied quietly. The contrast between them was striking. He stood tense, shoulders tight, eyes searching her face for answers. She stood grounded, unshaken, as if she had already lived through the worst of this moment years ago. The power between them had shifted, and he felt it. He was no longer the one in control. He pressed again, softer this time, almost pleading. "I deserve to know." She shook her head slowly. "You gave up that right." Her words were not cruel. They were factual. Final. He felt the truth circling closer, tightening its grip around him. The resemblance he had noticed earlier replayed in his mind with brutal clarity. The timing. The age. The silence he had chosen for 7 years. He didn't need her to say it. He already knew. Fear replaced confusion. Fear of what he had lost. Fear of what this answer would demand from him. She met his gaze one last time, then turned away, leaving him standing there with a question he was suddenly terrified to hear answered. The truth came slowly, like a shadow stretching over a bright room. He had guessed it. He had feared it. And now, with the quiet acknowledgement in her eyes and the unmistakable resemblance between the boy and himself, it could no longer be denied. The boy, laughing, talking, moving with an easy confidence, was his son. The moment hit him harder than he expected. His voice, when it came, was a mixture of disbelief and urgency. "Explain. Now. How is this possible?" He stepped closer, almost afraid to touch the reality in front of him. "I have rights. I deserve to know everything. I need to make this right. I need." She held up her hand, stopping him gently but firmly. Her tone was calm, unwavering. "You need to listen first." And she began, recounting every painful detail, every choice he had refused to make when it mattered. She spoke with measured honesty, describing the day she discovered the pregnancy, the shock in his eyes, the words he had said that had shattered her. She spoke of the demands, the accusations, and finally, the divorce, the signed papers, the cold lawyers, the money he offered in exchange for silence. She reminded him that for 7 years, she had carried this alone. Every milestone, every birthday, every scraped knee and triumph was hers to share, because he had chosen absence over presence. Her voice never broke, yet every word carried the weight of her pain, and of the life she had built without him. Unseen by him, the boy lingered nearby, pretending to be absorbed in a book, but listening carefully. He heard snippets of names, dates, accusations, and the faint tremor in his father's voice. The reality was no longer abstract for him. He understood more than either adult realized. By the time she finished, he was pale, shaken, unable to speak. He had expected denial, confrontation, perhaps even relief. Instead, he faced accountability he had never imagined he would have to meet. The boy was real, undeniable, and the years of rejection, abandonment, and silence had created a bond between mother and child that he could never erase. For the first time, he understood the weight of what he had lost, not a son he could control, but a life, a love, and a family built entirely without him. The boy looked up at him, curiosity clear in his wide, innocent eyes. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. His voice carried no judgment, only a quiet wonder. But the question landed with the weight of a hammer. The man hesitated, searching for words, but none felt right. The boy continued, unaware of the storm he had stirred. "Are you my father?" The word hung in the air, simple yet devastating. The boy had no attachment, no longing for the man standing before him. He didn't recognize him as a father, nor did he expect him to be. In those 7 years, the child had already built a life full of love, stability, and identity, anchored by the one person who had never left, his mother. She had been both shield and guide, teacher and hero, and her presence had been enough to shape him into the confident, kind, and intelligent boy before him. For the first time, the man saw what he had truly missed. Not just the milestones or birthdays, but the quiet, immeasurable moments that formed a child's world: scraped knees, whispered encouragements, bedtime stories, first steps, first words, first triumphs. All of it had passed without him. His absence could never be filled with money, apologies, or sudden attention. He opened his mouth, tried to speak, but the words faltered. How could he explain 7 years of absence? How could he demand forgiveness from someone who had never needed him? The boy looked back at his mother, safe and unshaken, and the realization hit him fully. He had lost everything that mattered. And in that quiet, devastating truth, karma had spoken. He had wanted control and convenience, but life had given him neither. What remained for him now was regret, and the understanding that some opportunities, once abandoned, could never be reclaimed. The man lingered longer than he should have, weighed down by the gravity of his absence and the boy who had grown without him. For the first time, he tried to bridge the gap he had created, offering gestures he thought might matter. He spoke of financial support, of wanting to be present in his son's life, of legal recognition, as if a signature or a check could make up for 7 years of silence. But she listened quietly, her face calm and resolute. She didn't dismiss him out of anger, nor did she soften her tone to spare him embarrassment. She simply stated the truth. Access to their son was not a right he could claim because of blood. It was something he would have to earn, step by careful step. Trust was not automatic. Forgiveness was not owed. You cannot buy back what you chose to walk away from, she said, her voice steady. You cannot demand love or loyalty now. That is not how it works. Every word highlighted the consequences of his past actions. He had abandoned them, and now, while regret filled his chest, it could not replace what was lost. He realized, painfully, that responsibility was not a favor. It had been a duty he had ignored. And though he could now attempt to make amends, the power dynamic had shifted irreversibly. She made it clear that she would not shield her son from disappointment or teach him to forgive out of obligation. The boy's life had been built on consistency, care, and love earned through presence. If the man wanted to be part of it, he would have to meet that standard, not impose his own desires. In that moment, he understood that regret is not the same as love, and apology is not a substitute for responsibility. Actions define relationships, not intentions, and some lessons, once learned too late, remain permanent. He stood at the edge of the park, watching them from a distance. The mother and son moved together, laughter spilling into the crisp air, hands brushing in unspoken comfort and trust. He noticed the ease in their steps, the quiet understanding between them, the love that had grown unshakable in his absence. For the first time, he saw the life he had walked away from, not as he remembered it, but as it had become, thriving without him. Time and choices had changed him. He was older, wiser, and yet powerless. No money, no charm, no reputation could recreate the bond that had been forged over years of care, presence, and unwavering devotion. He had missed birthdays, first steps, first words, and milestones that no apology could restore. He had abandoned love when it demanded responsibility, and now, watching from afar, he realized it was too late. The mother, strong and serene, held her son's hand tightly. She didn't look back, didn't glance toward the man who once rejected them. She had built a life that was complete, resilient, and full of hope. Her son, curious, intelligent, and confident, mirrored her strength. Together, they moved forward, unbroken by the absence that had once threatened to define them. And the lesson was clear, almost painfully so. Parenthood is not convenience. Love, once abandoned, does not wait for regret to arrive. It thrives where it is nurtured, and it disappears where it is neglected. The boy had never needed his father's approval, and she had never needed his presence to define her worth. He whispered to himself, barely audible, "Some things, once lost, cannot be reclaimed." The mother and son walked on, hand in hand, into a future he could observe but never enter, proof that love, responsibility, and presence are the only foundations that endure. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Sky High Stories.